Picture the greatest city the ancient world ever built. A city of 1,000,000 people, of marble temples and triumphal arches, of roads that stretched to Scotland in the north and the edge of the Sahara in the south. A city whose engineers built aqueducts that still carry water today. A civilization so advanced that we have spent 2,000 years pretending we invented everything it already knew. We call it the Eternal City. And the empire it birthed, we call it the foundation of Western civilization. But here is what the history books, the movies, and the monuments leave out. For the vast majority of the people who actually lived there, Rome was a trap. Not a city of glory, but a city of grinding, suffocating, deliberately engineered poverty. A city where the poor outnumbered the wealthy by a ratio of 50 to 1. And yet the entire system, the laws, the economy, the culture, the politics, was designed not to lift them up, but to keep them exactly where they were. Today, we are going to pull back the marble curtain. We are going to meet real Romans. Not Caesar, not Augustus, not Nero in his golden palace. We are going to meet Marcus, the grain worker, Livia, the tenement dweller, Sextus, the man who thought citizenship would save him, and learned, the hard way, that it wouldn't. Because the story of ancient Rome's poor is not just history. It is a blueprint. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's start with a number that should stop you cold. Historians estimate that at the height of the Roman Empire, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the city's population lived in what we would today call extreme poverty. Another 30 to 35% lived just above that line, what economists call subsistence living. That means, conservatively, 3 out of every 4 Romans were either desperately poor or one bad harvest away from becoming so. The wealthy, the senatorial class, the equestrians, the great landowners, made up less than 2% of the population. 2%. And they owned, controlled, and consumed the overwhelming majority of Rome's staggering wealth. 2% owned almost everything. 98% competed for what was left. Sound familiar? It should, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Who were these poor Romans, specifically? They had a name, the proletariat, Latin for those who contribute only their offspring. Think about that for a moment. The Roman state literally classified its poorest citizens by their ability to produce children, because that was the only thing the state assumed they had to offer. Not skills, not labor, not talent, just bodies, just future soldiers and future workers, just more of themselves. Below even the proletariat were the slaves, hundreds of thousands of them, perhaps a third of Rome's entire population in some periods, who had no legal personhood at all. We will return to them, because their existence is crucial to understanding why free Roman workers could never, ever get ahead. But let's start with the free poor. Let's start with where they lived, because the first thing Rome's system did to its poor was confine them to the most dangerous, degrading, and deliberately inadequate housing imaginable. Meet Marcus. He is 41 years old. He works as a porter in the docks along the Tiber River, hauling grain sacks from incoming ships to the warehouses that feed the city. He has done this job for 20 years. He is strong, reliable, experienced. And he lives with his wife and 3 children in a single room on the 4th floor of an insula on the Esquiline Hill. The room is roughly 4 meters by 5 meters. It has one window with no glass, just a wooden shutter that rattles in the wind. In winter, it is so cold that the children sleep in their clothes. In summer, the heat is unbearable. There is no running water above the ground floor. There is no latrine. To relieve himself, Marcus uses a chamber pot, which he empties into the street at night, or which sometimes gets tipped out the window by a neighbor in a hurry. There is no kitchen. Cooking fires are technically illegal on upper floors because the buildings burn so regularly that the city has simply accepted that tenement fires are a routine feature of Roman life. In a city that invented the aqueduct, the poor had no running water in their homes. In a city that built magnificent public baths, the poor paid per visit, and sometimes couldn't afford to. The insula, the island, they called it, Because the buildings were meant to rise like islands amid the streets, was Rome's solution to housing its enormous urban population. And it was, by any honest measure, a catastrophic and deliberately maintained failure. Here is what is remarkable. Roman law set height limits on insulae. Originally 21 meters, later reduced to 18 meters by Augustus after a particularly devastating rash of collapses. The law existed not because the state cared about the safety of the people inside, but because when these buildings fell down, they tended to fall onto other buildings and start fires that threatened the property of the wealthy. Let that land. The height limits were not about protecting the poor. They were about protecting wealthy property. When the buildings were allowed to be taller, as they routinely were anyway, because enforcement was selective and corruption was endemic, rents went up, conditions deteriorated, and the poor had nowhere else to go. Pliny the Elder described a building collapse in Rome as though it were a minor irritant, like a cart getting stuck in traffic. The Roman poet Juvenal, writing in the early 2nd century AD, described the experience of being a poor Roman in his satires with biting, furious clarity. He wrote about how a man could be buried alive in his sleep, how the wooden supports groaned, how the landlords repaired nothing, how they expected full rent in advance while the buildings literally crumbled around their tenants. The Roman landlord class, the domini, was fabulously wealthy, politically connected, and legally insulated. Because here is the thing, the great Roman senators and generals who publicly sneered at commerce, they owned the insulae, indirectly, through freedmen agents and business intermediaries, because openly admitting to being a landlord was considered beneath their dignity. But the money flowed upward all the same. The wealthy built the slums. The wealthy collected the rent. And the law protected the wealthy, not the people inside. Marcus paid roughly half of his monthly income on rent. And for that, he got a room that could, on any given night, catch fire, collapse, or simply open its floor to a winter wind that no amount of huddling could keep out. And here is what Marcus could not do. He could not simply move. Because the insula was not just housing. It was proximity to work, to the docks, to the networks of fellow workers who helped him find jobs on slow days, to the grain distribution point, to everything that kept him and his family alive. Leave the insula, and you might gain slightly better shelter while losing the social infrastructure that kept food on your table. The poor were not just trapped by poverty. They were trapped by geography, by the web of survival itself. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. Because Rome knew it had a problem. A city with this level of inequality, with this much desperation crammed into this small a space, with this many people who had nothing to lose, that city should have burned, should have risen up, should have torn the senatorial mansions on the Palatine Hill apart brick by brick. It didn't. And the reason why is one of the most brilliantly cynical political innovations in human history. Juvenal called it panem et circenses, bread and circuses, the two things you give a population to make sure they never get around to revolution. The grain dole, the annona, later formalized as the fermentatio, was one of Rome's most celebrated institutions. Free grain, distributed to the citizens of Rome. At its height, over 200,000 people received it. Emperors expanded it, tweaked it, used it to win popularity. It sounds generous, doesn't it? It sounds like Rome actually cared. But let's look at what it actually was. First, it was only for citizens, not for freed slaves who hadn't completed the full citizenship process. Not for non-citizens, of which Rome had millions. Not for women, who were not independent legal persons in Roman law and were expected to receive grain through their male relatives. Not for the slaves, who made up a massive portion of the labor force. The grain dole was not universal welfare. It was a tool for managing a specific, politically volatile demographic, the male citizen proletariat of the city, while leaving everyone else to manage as best they could. Second, it was enough to survive, but designed to ensure you could never do more than survive. The grain ration kept you alive. It did not keep you comfortable. It did not keep your children well fed. It certainly did not cover rent, clothing, fuel for heat, or the 100 other expenses of urban life. To cover those, you still had to work. You still had to scramble. The dole kept you just above the level of outright starvation, which was precisely the point. A starving man might revolt. A man who is hungry but not quite starving is too busy trying to close the gap to organize politically. Then there were the ludi, the games, gladiatorial contests, chariot races, animal hunts in the Colosseum, where they flooded the arena and staged mock naval battles. These were not occasional entertainment. By the 4th century AD, there were 177 official festival days per year in Rome. Nearly every other day, the state was providing some form of spectacular entertainment, free to attend, subsidized by the emperor or by wealthy aristocrats seeking popularity. Here is a modern analogy. Imagine a city where half the population lives below the poverty line. And instead of building affordable housing, instead of raising wages, instead of investing in education or healthcare, the government builds the world's greatest sports stadium, makes all tickets free, and fills the calendar with events every other day. And then, when anyone complains about wages or housing, the politicians point to the free stadium and say, "What more do you want? Look how much we give you." That was Rome. The games were spectacular. They were thrilling. People genuinely loved them. And they served a political function so effective that modern political theorists still study them. They provided a shared spectacle that cut across class lines, rich and poor sitting in the same building, united by the same drama, the same cheering, the same cathartic violence. They gave the powerless a momentary sense of participation. And crucially, they gave the emperor a direct relationship with the people that bypassed the Senate, bypassed the aristocracy, bypassed every intermediary. A relationship based entirely on spectacle and generosity, not on rights or representation. The circus didn't just distract the poor. It made them feel like participants in Roman greatness, without giving them any actual power to change their conditions. Now let's talk about money. Specifically, let's talk about how Rome made sure its poor could never accumulate any. Meet Sextus. He is a small farmer from Latium, about 30 miles south of Rome. He owns, or rather, he is paying off, a small parcel of land that his father left him. He grows grain and some vegetables. In a good year, he feeds his family and has a modest surplus to sell. He is, by the standards of the Roman countryside, not the worst off. He is not a slave. He is a citizen. He thinks these things will protect him. Then comes a bad harvest. One bad harvest. His crops fail. He cannot pay his taxes, and Roman taxes were collected in cash, not in kind, which meant he first had to sell his grain to get money, and with no grain to sell, he has no money. He borrows from a local money lender, a negotiator. The interest rate? Somewhere between 12 and 48% per year. These were the legal ranges in Roman law. In practice, many lenders charged more, especially to desperate borrowers with no collateral except their land. Sextus takes the loan. He hopes next year will be better. It is not. He takes another loan to cover the first one. His land, which he put up as security, is now technically the lender's. And then, the moment that has played out, in one form or another, across thousands of years of human history, he cannot pay. The land is gone. This was not an accident. This was how Roman aristocrats assembled their great estates. One small farm at a time. One desperate family at a time. The latifundia, those great slave-worked agricultural estates that Roman moralists occasionally complained about, though they often owned them, were built precisely this way. Through debt, through foreclosure, through the perfectly legal, perfectly systematic dispossession of the small farmer class. And this is where slavery re-enters the story with devastating effect. Once Sextus has lost his land, what does he do? He could go to Rome and join the urban poor. But if he stays in the countryside and tries to find work as a day laborer, a mercenarius, he is competing directly with slave labor. A Roman slave did not earn wages. His labor cost the landowner only housing and food, minimal as those were. A free laborer needed to earn enough to feed himself, pay rent, and sustain himself between work periods. He could not compete on price with someone who had no survival costs of his own to cover. This is the wickedly elegant trap at the heart of the Roman economy. Slavery kept wages at the floor. Kept wages at the floor, so free laborers could never save. Could never save, so they were perpetually vulnerable to debt. Vulnerable to debt, so they regularly lost whatever small property they had. And when they lost their property, they joined the mass of landless poor who were competing with slave labor for work. The Roman poor were not poor despite the system. They were poor because of the system. The system required their poverty to function. Let's talk about Roman law. Because when we talk about Rome's legacy to Western civilization, Roman law is almost always near the top of the list. The foundation of legal systems across Europe, Latin America, and beyond. Codified, rational, sophisticated. And for the wealthy, it absolutely was. But the law that applied to a Roman senator was not the same law that applied to Marcus the dock worker. Literally, not metaphorically. Literally different legal categories, different penalties, different procedures, different rights. Roman law divided citizens into two broad categories that crystallized over time. The honestiores, the more honorable, meaning the wealthy, and the humiliores, the more humble, meaning everyone else. These were not informal social designations. They were legal classifications that determined what punishments you could receive, what protections you had, whether your testimony was believed in court, and what happened to you if you were accused of a crime. If a honestiores committed a capital crime, he might be exiled. If a humiliores committed the same crime, he could be executed, or worse, sent to the mines or the arena. The mines. Let's dwell on that for a moment. Roman mining, in Spain, in Dacia, in North Africa, was effectively a death sentence. Miners worked in narrow tunnels with no ventilation, no safety, and no daylight, often shackled in place. Life expectancy in the mines was measured in months, not years. It was used as a punishment specifically for the lower classes. The same crime for which a rich man received a comfortable exile to a Greek island. Access to the courts was itself a luxury. Roman legal proceedings required you to appear in person, often multiple times, over long periods. For a day laborer, each court appearance meant a day without wages. Legal representation, while not formally required, was essential in practice, and skilled advocates were expensive, and they generally worked for wealthy clients who could reward them with political favors and social connections. The poor navigated the courts essentially alone, against opponents who arrived with an entourage. And let's not forget patronage, the clientele system that underpinned all of Roman social life. Every morning, the poor clients of Rome lined up outside the homes of their wealthy patrons for the salutatio, the morning greeting. In exchange for political support, for votes, for running errands, and providing a visible social audience, the patron might give a small gift, the sportula, in food or money. Enough to help, not enough to change anything. The patronage system was spoken of in almost sacred terms. It was portrayed as mutual, as dignified, as the beautiful fabric of Roman society. But it was, functionally, a mechanism for making the poor dependent on specific wealthy individuals, dependent in ways that made collective action, political organization, and class solidarity nearly impossible. You didn't organize against your patron. You cultivated him. You needed him. That need was the entire point. I want to take a moment away from systems and statistics. Because it's easy, talking about the Roman poor at a distance, to reduce them to abstractions, to see them as a sociological category rather than as people. So let me introduce you to Livia. She is not a famous Roman. She appears in no marble busts, no mosaics, no literary texts. We know about her because of a remarkable set of wooden writing tablets found at Vindolanda, near Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and because of graffiti preserved in Pompeii. and because archaeologists studying Roman skeletal remains can read the story of a life in bones. Livia is about 30 years old, though the wear on her skeleton would suggest she is older. She has lived in Rome her whole life. She is the wife of a freedman, a former slave who has earned his freedom and works as a small craftsman. They are not the very worst off. They have a slightly larger room than most. Her husband's trade brings in enough that they rarely go hungry. But Livia has buried 2 of her 4 children. The first died at 18 months from a fever. The second at 4 years old, falling from the stairwell of the insula. Those staircases that were steep, narrow, and without railings because every inch of space in an insula was monetized. She does not talk about these children by name with strangers. She carries them inside. Roman child mortality among the poor was catastrophic. Estimates suggest that nearly half of Roman children born in urban poverty did not survive to the age of 10. Her own health is worn in the usual ways of a poor Roman woman. Her teeth, several of them, are cracked or missing, the result of a diet high in grit-contaminated grain that was the daily reality of the cheapest bread available. Her back bears the stress markers of heavy carrying. Water from the communal fountain, goods from the market, children. Her eyesight has been damaged by years of working in poor light, mending cloth for extra income. She cannot read. This is not unusual. Literacy rates among the Roman poor were low, though not as low as once thought. She has picked up numbers and some basic Latin through necessity. She navigates the city's bureaucracy, such as it is, through memory and through trusted intermediaries. What is Livia's relationship with Roman grandeur? She has walked past the forum. She has attended the games, not often, because even free events require time, and time is money. She has seen the temples. She knows, abstractly, that Rome is the greatest city in the world because everyone says so, and because certainly nothing she has ever experienced has offered a comparison. But the marble and the monuments are not her Rome. Her Rome is the fountain she walks to every morning with a heavy clay pot. The grain queue where she sometimes waits 2 hours for her ration. The landlord's agent who knocks on the door every month with his hand already out. The small shrine to the household gods in the corner of her room, where she burns a pinch of incense when she has it, and prays in the particular way of people who have been taught that the universe is run by forces that do not especially care about them. She is not miserable in the way we might imagine. She laughs. She has friends. She loves her husband and her 2 surviving children with the fierce, practical love of someone who knows how quickly everything can be taken away. She finds joy in small things, the public baths when they can afford it, the neighborhood festival, a good day when the work is plentiful and the money stretches. But she is also, in the most important sense, trapped. And she knows it, not with despair, but with the resigned clarity of someone who has grown up inside a cage so well built that its bars are invisible. This is just how things are. This is just what life is. The idea that it could be otherwise, that the system she lives inside is a choice, not a law of nature, is not something Rome's cultural apparatus has any interest in encouraging her to think. Here is something that might surprise you. Rome had people who saw exactly what was happening, who named it, clearly and with fury, and demanded something different. They were ignored, marginalized, or killed. But they existed. Tiberius Gracchus, tribune of the plebs in 133 BC, looked at the consolidation of Roman land in the hands of the aristocracy, the precise Sextus and the debt trap process we described, and proposed a land reform. Not radical redistribution, not revolution. He wanted to enforce a law that already existed, limiting how much public land any single person could hold, and redistribute the excess to landless veterans and the poor. He was beaten to death by a mob of senators in the Roman Forum. His body was thrown into the Tiber. His brother Gaius, who took up the cause a decade later and went further, proposing grain subsidies, colonial settlements for the poor, extension of citizenship, was driven to suicide when a senatorial counterattack stripped him of his power. 3,000 of his supporters were killed. Their property was confiscated. Rome's upper class was willing to commit mass murder to protect a system of inequality. That is not political dysfunction. That is the system working exactly as designed. Later, the philosopher and statesman Seneca, himself a man of enormous wealth, which complicates matters considerably, wrote with startling clarity about the moral degradation of poverty and the hypocrisy of Roman attitudes toward it. In his letters, he described walking through the slums of Rome with something that reads unmistakably like shame. He understood that the poverty was manufactured. He understood its mechanisms. He wrote about it, and then he went home to his villa. Even Cicero, the great voice of Roman republicanism, acknowledged in his private letters that the Roman poor were being systematically excluded from the political life that was theoretically theirs by right. That the assemblies were structured to give the wealthy classes overwhelming voting weight, while the poor voted last, if they voted at all. The knowledge was there. The consciousness was there. What was absent was the political will and the structural power to act on it. I want to be careful here. History is not allegory. Ancient Rome is not a perfect one-to-one map of any modern society. The specific mechanisms, the specific inequalities, the specific horror of slavery, these are not identical to anything existing today. But the patterns are worth sitting with. The housing that makes money for the wealthy while offering the minimum survivable conditions for everyone else, and the legal systems that protect the landlords. The entertainment and spectacle that keeps people emotionally invested in the system while materially unchanged within it. The debt mechanisms that prevent accumulation of wealth among the poor while transferring it upward. The patronage networks that create individual dependency rather than collective power. The two-tier legal system where the same actions carry radically different consequences depending on your social position. The welfare systems calibrated to maintain just enough stability to prevent revolt without providing the genuine security that would allow people to demand more. Rome did not hide these mechanisms. They were visible, named, and sometimes even celebrated. The question was never whether the system was unjust. The question was always whether anyone with power to change it would choose to. The Gracchi brothers thought they could change it through legitimate political channels. They were murdered for trying. Spartacus tried a different approach. He and roughly 70,000 enslaved and dispossessed people held the Roman military at bay for 2 years. He was defeated, and 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way, placed at regular intervals for 350 miles, as a message to anyone else considering the same thought. Rome was not going to change from within, and so it didn't change. It persisted for centuries more, its inequality deepening, its poor growing poorer relative to its rich, its military and spectacle and grain doles keeping the whole structure standing, until eventually the structure could no longer hold. The Western Roman Empire did not fall to barbarian hordes, as we are often told. It collapsed, in significant part, because its internal contradictions became unmanageable. Because a society that extracts everything from its working people while giving them only circuses in return eventually runs out of both the people and the will to sustain itself. Marcus never owned land. He died at 53, which was old for a dock worker, of a lung condition common among men who spent their lives carrying grain dust. His children survived him. His son worked the same docks. His daughter married a tradesman and moved to a slightly better insula 2 streets away. They were, by the standards of their world, fine. Livia outlived her husband and spent her final years as a dependent of her son, as Roman law and custom expected. She never questioned, at least not in any way that left a record, whether things could have been different. The world was the world. The gods had made it so. Who was she to say otherwise? And that, perhaps, is the most chilling thing about a system that works. Not the violence, not the debt spirals, not the crumbling buildings and the grain queues and the two-tier justice. It's that a system sophisticated enough, total enough, and durable enough eventually stops looking like a system at all. It starts to look like the way things are. Like nature. Like fate. Like something beyond question. Rome's greatest engineering achievement was not the aqueduct. It was not the road, or the arch, or the dome. It was convincing 3/4 of its population that their poverty was inevitable, while building the most elaborate, beautiful, and deliberate architecture of inequality the ancient world had ever seen. And we are still, 2,000 years later, standing in its ruins, marveling at the marble, forgetting to ask who built it. The following notes provide additional context for claims made in this script. Estimates of Rome's population and wealth distribution draw primarily from Walter Scheidl's work in The Great Leveler, 2017, and Escape from Rome, 2019, as well as Peter Garncy's Famine and Food Supply in the Greco-Roman World, 1988. The 40 to 50% extreme poverty figure reflects scholarly consensus, though exact numbers are inherently speculative given the nature of ancient sources. Primary sources include Juvenal's Satires, Books 3, Martial's Epigrams, and Vitruvius on Building Regulations. For modern reconstruction, Andrew Wallace Hadrill's Houses and Society in Pompeii and Herculaneum, 1994, and Roger Ling's archaeological work on Roman domestic architecture. The fermentatio and its political function is extensively documented. C. Garnsey, 1988, cited above, and Paul Erdkamp's The Grain Market in the Roman Empire, 2005. The deliberate political calculus of the dole is analyzed in detail in Henrik Moritzon's Politics in the Roman Republic, 2017. This legal distinction is documented in the Digest of Justinian, compiled 530s AD, but drawing on earlier legal practice. See Garnsey's Social Status and Legal Privilege in the Roman Empire, 1970, which remains the definitive study of this legal inequality. Primary sources: Plutarch's Lives of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, and Appian's Civil Wars Book I. Modern analysis: David Stockton's The Gracchi, 1979. The multi-causal model of Rome's fall is central to Brian Ward Perkins' The Fall of Rome and the End of Civilization, 2005, and Kyle Harper's The Fate of Rome, 2017. The role of internal inequality in systemic collapse is further analyzed in Walter Scheidl's comparative work. If this story moved you, like this video and hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love history the way you do. And let us know what part of this story surprised you the more. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. See you in our next video.